because I really believe that you're going to solve all of the dating problems in the world. I think that's why we brought together, because I believe in fate. No, that's garbage. I don't. But
like, aren't you the one who doesn't believe in like astrology, all of that?
Yeah, that's me. That's me.
Yeah.
So, but Bethany Nicole has come to save us all from bad dating. That's how I'm looking at this.
Yes.
So are you an expert? Would you call yourself an expert?
I usually do the tagline of relationship expert. Yeah.
Yeah. What makes an expert? Because I've been dating for a long time and I definitely don't feel like an expert.
I feel like it's a little bit of a blend, right? Like it's your personal experience, like a hint of professional experience, and then just kind of bumbling your way through it until you find what works for you and what works for the people you work with. And
bumbling,
like bumbling, get
bumbling?
it?
Yeah, I get
There's
it.
that writer.
I get it. But you also dated. Yeah. You also are in LA, which is like an entirely different beast.
It's a whole different scene. Yeah, the dating scene here is interesting.
What is it about the city that people just have this really, is it because we're superficial, or is it because, I don't know, there's just, not that I've dated a lot around the country, but I've moved around the country and met a lot of different people, different backgrounds. It just seems like we have such a bizarre way of looking at relationships and going out.
Yeah.
Why? I don't get it. Why?
I just feel like there's a lot of ego that's mixed in. There's a lot of actors and musicians and people trying to make it and willing to like do whatever they need to do that. And I think there's just not a lot of self-knowledge in a lot of ways. And
wait, so we have fake it till we make it in dating?
Yeah. And I think we just have a lot of people that get into their own heads about what their accomplishments are, or and they just really hold on to that, so they're not able to get to this deeper level of dating because they're just stuck at this, well, I was an extra on Scrubs, so you have to match me there. And you're just like, that's not even that cool. Like, I don't know, I just feel like they're just not able to get deeper.
It's funny you bring that up, because I will admit that so I was married for 16 years. And then I've been divorced now for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, something like that. At a certain point, you stop counting. I guess it's part of the healing process.
Right.
So I'll admit, I've done Bumble. I did Tinder for like a heartbeat. And then I said, whoa, this is not interesting.
Not the scene, yeah.
But Bumble is weird because we're going to do our first multimedia thing. I'm going to play you something.
Okay.
And this sums up my entire this sums up my entire feeling on Bumble. This is actually TikTok, which is like which is not, probably I'm not the demographic for TikTok, but I've actually found some fun things. So this is my feelings on Bumble, especially in LA. All right. Yeah.
All the women in the audience, I am going to predict your Tinder bio using only my psychic powers. Okay. You are a world traveler dog mom. You like wine and Netflix. You are just as comfortable going out as you are staying home. And you are looking for a partner in crime to go on adventures with.
Oh my God, that's good. Yeah.
Doesn't that about some? Also, you're a foodie. That's the last thing that I cut off. That's also, you're a foodie. Yeah. And if I had a nickel, I would have Joe Rogan's Spotify money if I had a nickel for every time I had read that in a profile.
Oh, absolutely. They definitely get repetitive.
And then if they get offended if you kind of call them out. The other thing, so like I said, I've been divorced now for 4 or 5 years. So I've been off and off Bumble a few times, and it's amazing how many of the same photographs I have seen for the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh yeah. I do that too. I run across the same ones over and over.
Oh, you're on there too.
I used it. I don't actually use Bumble. I usually use like Hinge or Meet Mindful. But I have used Bumble for one of the other podcasts where I did the live swipe, and I've seen like the same, and I've done that for a couple, and I've seen the same pictures over and over. I'm like, are we not meeting people on this? Or like, why are we still the same
What's the
people.
biggest problem then? If people are going, and that's not just LA, but anywhere, what's the biggest problem if somebody's going on one of these dating apps and they're not finding their soulmate? They're not finding their true love. Why? What's the problem?
I mean, I feel like there's so many reasons, and I don't know. I think too, one of the things I come across with people I work with, a lot of it is just timing, right? There's a human component to dating. It's not a formula. It's not, you can be doing everything right and still just not meet your person or the person that you want to be with, because you can only be, if you're wanting to get married, that's one person, like, so you can't be with everybody. And so I feel like there's just this element of timing that sometimes people just don't take into account. And so there is that question of like, why am I not meeting people? What am I doing wrong? And it's like, you maybe just aren't doing anything wrong. Maybe you just haven't met them yet, And so I feel like there's an element of that, but then there's also, maybe an element of you are doing something wrong.
The Open Highway Podcast is a production of Viking Dog Entertainment. And now you can visit the all-new Viking Dog store for access to everything that Viking Dog has to offer. Movies, books, and apparel, including motivational lines, open highway merchandise, and exclusive wolf designs that raise money for wolf rescue organizations. So visit thevikingdogstore.com today.
Welcome to The Joys of Binge Reading, the show for anyone who ever got to the end of a great book and wanted to read the next installment. I'm Jenny Wheeler, and every week we interview successful popular fiction authors and recommend the best in mystery, suspense, historical and women's fiction, and light romance, so you'll never be without a book you can't put down. Binge reading reflects the changes we're seeing, influenced by digital publishing and binge-watching TV. We don't want to wait a whole year anymore for the next book from our favourite author. We want it right now. We talk about the books, audio or digital, you just might like to buy online at midnight when you can't sleep. I've been a bookaholic since the day I learned to read, and I'm also a former magazine and newspaper editor, as well as a historical mystery author myself, writing the Of Gold and Blood Old California series. So I've been in training to host a book podcast for an awful long time. Come and join us online. Discover the best of popular fiction, 30 minutes every Monday, wherever you get your favorite podcast, and you'll never be without a book you can't put down.
I heard this term the other day that I thought was really funny. I was talking to this dude about dating.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about Bumble and some of the dating apps, and he came up with the term a clean pull.
A clean
He's
pull?
like, a
Okay.
clean pull is the idea of you meet somebody live. You meet somebody, meeting somebody in your day-to-day life. It's a clean pull. You didn't have any assistance.
Okay.
And I was like, I find that really difficult now, especially with COVID.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
I know I don't have exactly the social skills that I used to have. That's something I'm constantly working on. You can't just walk up to somebody in the produce section and be like, "Excuse me, can you pull your mask down to find out if I'm attracted to you so I can strike up a conversation?"
Yeah, that is a whole new category, because people can lower their masks and you're just like, oh, never mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Which sounds horrible, but it's true.
No, but it's not.
We're
It's
all
like
thinking it.
you have lovely eyes, but your dental work is British. That's an issue. Plus, I don't think people are as open. They aren't in the mood to like strike up conversations.
Yeah. And I think everyone's on the same page of like, how do you interact with people again? Like, I don't remember how to do this,
I don't. Is it? So it's not just me.
It's not just you. It's not just you.
So we need to find ways then to, how do you break that down? Because it seems like ancient history at this point that you actually used to talk to somebody that you met.
Yeah.
And, I'm reaching a point too, age-wise, where it's like the idea of going out to a club or a loud bar or something like that is just abhorrent.
Yeah.
It fills me with dread.
Yeah.
So where can you go in the time of COVID and actually get, I'm going to steal his term, a clean pull? Where do we go? What do we do?
I mean, it's a tough one because dating apps are kind of ruling the day right now as far as how people are meeting each other because of COVID. Like, you don't want to just, cold walk up to someone and start a conversation with the masks, or even just getting that close to someone. We have like the separation, so people can be really uncomfortable with someone just getting up in their space that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I feel like, yeah, unfortunately, dating apps seem to be the ruling champs right now of how people are meeting. And I think we're kind of slowly maybe getting there. Like, I know my gym is finally like mask optional, but slowly but surely I think we're getting back to more of a clean pool. But I mean,
but you're not supposed to meet people at the gym. That's what we're told as men.
Oh, to like walk
unless
up.
It's like, yeah, it's like, and I watch it because I go to the gym a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I, even before COVID, like, you would watch the discomfort that a woman would have when a guy walked up to him. And some of them, it was just obvious, like the guy was being a douchebag. And you're just like, going up and teaching her how to do the lift that she obviously knows how to do.
Yeah, no. See, but I do Orange Theory, so that's like a class. So you have like time before and after where you're in the lobby. So that would be like more of a casual way that you could say like, oh man, that was a really hard class today. And then the girl could interact with you or not. Like, she could say like, oh my God, I know, like the treadmill is terrible. Or she could be like, yeah, it was, and then just walk away, so she has more of a feeling of security in that scenario. But yeah, walking up to a girl in the gym and trying to teach her something or commenting on her body, like,
yeah, that's kind of creep factor.
That's super creep factor. Like, please don't anyone do that.
I remember that now. Like, I remember going to classes, and I remember you actually would have the social time to talk to somebody, or you could, if you talked to them before the class and there was a little bit of a buzz going on and there's a connection between, then maybe you could, some eye contact during class and then afterwards. And wow, I remember that. That seems like ancient history.
It does, but it's like a good, safe way to approach it because it really does give both people kind of the option of like, you can take it to the next level of interaction or you can not. And that's a safe way to kind of, broach a subject or see if there's maybe at least an initial connection. And so things like that are great, but we're so low on those right now.
Yeah. So help me out then. So, because this isn't about anybody listening, this is purely about me.
Okay.
So help me out. Like, what, in a time of, since we're still wearing masks and we live in LA, I'm curious where you go, where it's optional, because my gym is still mandatory. So maybe we shouldn't throw them under the bus, but
they just started that this week, and it's Orange Theory. It's Orange Theory Fitness.
Okay.
And I think it's like gym by gym basis, and you have to wear it like in the lobby and stuff still. But then once you're in the class,
because countywide, LA County is still mandated. So
I think it's also vaccination. Like, you have to show your proof of vax. It's like a whole.
It's the Wild West, really.
Yeah, and it's just started. So I mean, who knows if it'll last a week and then we're back to full mask.
But there's an interesting point, because that's something, and I run into it normally, just not even just dating, but just people in LA. And I'm sure this is anywhere in the world, not just LA or even the United States, is now we're running into, well, it used to be like, oh, I can't date you, you're a conservative, you're a liberal, oh, I can't date you this religious thing. Now it's like, well, how do you feel about mask mandates? How do you feel about
Are vaccines? You vaccinated?
It's on Bumble now.
It is.
People have them on there.
I've seen it across like most of them, that it's like you can put vax or not vax. And for ones like OkCupid, I think is one that lets you filter like based on preferences, and they have an option where you can just filter out all the like vaccinated or unvaccinated people. Like, it's a whole thing now, like definitely a whole thing.
You could literally see, so I could be standing in we'll go back to the produce aisle, because obviously I go to the grocery store a lot.
Right.
You can be standing in the produce aisle, strike up a conversation with a woman with beautiful eyes, and then just go, oh, well, I'm going to pull my mask down for a second just so you see what I look like. You do that, and suddenly it's a deal breaker because she's a hardcore masker, and you just lost the whole thing.
I
we have a
know.
whole other conversation we never even thought we would need to have.
I know. It's like, I mean, we're definitely navigating just really different times, but, and, you know, we talk about like medical decisions with each other just very naturally, like, oh, are you vaccinated? Have you had a COVID test lately? Like, these are like medical questions that we just really comfortably talk to each other about now. Like, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, and I went to the dentist and I went to the doctor. I mean, what else are you going to throw out?
Yeah.
It's become what happened to it's more, what is it? It's sexier to conceal than reveal. I
Yeah,
guess that's apparently
that's
not true with our medical records
God.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you suggest that people flirt with masks? How do you suggest what is your advice for somebody if they see, it's just so weird to me because it was tough enough in the old days because you would take in the entire image, and I'm not trying to boil this down to like just sex or appearance, but we have to admit, like, if you're not attracted to somebody physically, it's difficult to make that connection. So it used to be, okay, well, I like what I see, maybe even I'm a believer in archetypes. I believe that there are physical archetypes to people, and that there are some personality traits that do go along with certain physical archetypes. I've run up against people who don't agree, but I urge people to like look into it, and I think you'll find there's some truth to that.
You know what else that is? That's astrology.
Oh, no. That's like, don't mess with redheads because they're
fire because they're fire signs. Yeah, I could have just told you that. Yeah, you are dancing around the astrology like fire.
No. It's
but
science.
deny. Okay.
I just interviewed a guy, how to talk to science deniers. So Lee McIntyre. So he's going to be mad. He's like, damn it, Eric, 2 hours we talked. But now you see somebody and you're like, maybe. So what do you do?
I mean, I think at that point you're really just gonna have to try to see what other factors you can connect on, and at least, because really, like, how are you gonna get someone to take their mask off unless you go on like a date or like go grab coffee or whatever? But at that point, you've asked them out. But I think you really, like, kind of the advice I would give is just like see if there's enough of a connection, even without knowing what's under the mask, that you could hold up a good coffee date with them. Right? Like, if they're maybe interested in something you're interested in, that way it's not a total loss, right? Like, if you go on this coffee date, they take their mask off and you're like, oh no, like, this is not a thing, then at least you can have like a cool conversation, you've had a cup of coffee, and you can part ways, and it's not a big, huge issue, right? Like, and you haven't wasted any time. I mean, good conversations are good conversations. So
this could actually make us less shallow as
yeah. It could. I mean, there's potential.
Or else we just have lots and lots of friends.
Yeah, exactly. So
you posted something today I thought was interesting. How to say no to a second date.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not as easy. Sometimes why do they go on those second dates when they don't want to?
I know, it's actually a really big thing. I'm trying to remember who I was talking to about this the other day. It was on a podcast with a guy, and he was like shocked that this was a thing. But like, I think especially for females, not to make it a gender thing, but we definitely feel like this guilt, or like, oh, well, maybe, you know, he was kind of nice. Like, it's okay. I don't want to hurt his feelings. I'll go on a second date. And, you know, or even like they just have a hard time saying no in general, like if they're asked. And so, yeah, it's just a huge issue that a lot of women struggle with, and men seem to be like endlessly surprised by this. But I think men struggle with it sometimes too, like, especially if the person hasn't really like done something wrong, or, you know, you're not horribly unattracted to them, or they seem nice or whatever. But like, again, if you're not here for friendship, then don't waste everybody's time, you know?
Do you think it's giving them the benefit of the doubt that, you know, we're all a little awkward on that first date, that maybe they'll iron out?
It could be that, but I think, you know, there's definitely the category where a woman is like, this is absolutely not going to happen. And then they're still like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt his feelings, so I'll go.
Well, that's the whole, like, they know within the first 10 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, they look at your shoes apparently, and they can tell everything by your shoes. Is that true? I've heard that multiple times.
We're very perceptive, like very perceptive.
Why? Explain the shoes.
Because we can just tell, like, for us, these small things represent big things. And that is like the constant disconnect from men and women. Like, men are like, I don't understand how you're blowing this out of proportion. And we're over here like, how do you not get this? Because we can take these minute details and see how they could translate to something bigger. So, I mean, yeah, if somebody has very little patience with, a waiter, then we can see that as, oh, you're not a patient person. What happens when I ignore you, or I'm not, you're not madly in love with me? This is just like who you are as a person, right? But to a male, they could be like, okay, so I was snappy with the waiter. Why is this a huge deal? But that's like how women process things. We're like, okay, how is this going to affect us down the road?
But what's the difference between processing and observing and nitpicking?
There is definitely that. I think,
and I'm sure there's a better term than nitpicking. It probably like ticks off, I wouldn't say that to someone. You're nitpicking.
You're nitpicking.
But there's some things where it's just like, okay, okay. So like I dated somebody who believed that men over the age of 40 should not wear t-shirts. Like, and I don't mean like some joke t-shirt. I mean, it was like men over 40 should never wear t-shirt and at all. They should always wear dress shirts. And I'm like, no, not going to happen. So is that nitpicking or is that a deal breaker?
I mean, that I would really like want to sit down with her and see where that's coming from, because that's an odd one. And I don't know. I mean, that could be like so many things, right? That could be like, she doesn't find that attractive. That could be it, maybe in her mind makes her worried that they're going to be really immature, or maybe she dated a guy who was over 40 and wore these t-shirts and was a complete child. Like, you never know where that kind of stuff is coming from. But like, usually with nitpicking, I mean, there are just genuinely shallow people who will nitpick over really silly things.
In LA, never.
But I would say, I don't even know the percentage, but I would say probably like 8 out of 10 times there's some like deeper thing driving the nitpicking. Like, if somebody, keeps coming at their boyfriend because he comes home 10 minutes late, that could be seen as nitpicking, but maybe that's a deeper fear of, are you not interested? Do you not want to spend time with me? Are you cheating on me? Like, you just never know where that, usually if there's a big reaction to something, if it's out of proportion, there's usually something going on there. But I mean, at the end of the day too, like if you like wearing t-shirts and you're over 40 and she doesn't like that, cool. She can find someone who doesn't, and you can find someone who likes it. Like that, I feel like is like, that's a deal breaker. But that's the thing with like negativity and nitpicking. It's cancer to a relationship, because no one wants to hear that all the time.
But I wonder as people get older, I'm not 21-year-old. I'm not 21 anymore. Obviously, anyone who's met me. But as we get older, do you find that people settle? Well, not settle. There's a difference between saying this is what's important,
right,
to me, and this really isn't important. Something I thought that was important at 21, now I see is just silly.
Yeah.
Versus settling. And there's a difference between the two things.
Yeah. I think as we get older, we definitely do streamline our dating experience, and we can see that some of the things that mattered to us before, they don't matter in the reality, in the long-term relationship realm. They're silly. But then there is, the concept, if you're settling on really big aspects, but people do just so they don't have to be alone, right? That's what you see a lot of too. And that's like, that can be a lot of things. That can be like traveling, that could be having kids, that could be having a legal marriage. Sometimes if people have been married a couple times or even once, they're like, I don't want a legal marriage again. I don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And someone else really does, and they've never been married, but they settle. They're like, well, I guess this is fine. But like, I feel like at any age, you should be really clear of like, this is what I genuinely need and want out of a relationship. But you can definitely see that, the difference, I think, is pretty clear when you like, sit down and think about it. Like, settling for someone who doesn't want to have kids and you do, that's a huge issue. Yeah. Whereas being okay that someone doesn't like wash every dish the minute it hits the sink and you just kind of like let that go, like that's fine. There's obviously like a difference.
What about expectations then? Because I know I see it I see it on Bumble all the time, and I run into it in LA, and I'm sure it's other places where it's like, oh, well, we're going to go to the brand new restaurant at least once a week. You're
Mhm.
going to pick me up in it always cracks me up when I see on those profiles, I love to be spoiled. Who doesn't? Like
Yeah,
who,
like, what
who
does that
doesn't love
mean?
what like you're gonna say treat me like shit. You're
Yeah.
not like, no one is gonna say that. But it's like, well, the fact that you point that out
Mhm.
tells me that you're not looking for someone who cares about you. You're looking for somebody who's going to take care of you. And then we get into the whole gold digger thing. I don't even know if that's a term anymore. Maybe I'm
think it
showing my
is.
age with that. But it's like, yeah, I expect you to wine me. I expect you to dine me. I expect you to take me out, to the new places. That's not a relationship. That's a job.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's employment.
Yeah. And
That's
I mean, and at the end of the day, like, how much does that really matter in a long-term scenario? And what happens when you hit COVID and you can't go anywhere or do anything and you're stuck in the house with this person? Like,
yeah. How many people did you know that like met someone right before COVID and dropped into a COVID relationship? Did you run into a lot of that?
I actually ran into more the opposite. Like, I know so many people who broke up during,
Really?
like, divorced and broke up or called off weddings. Like, that's more the number I know. I do know like a couple that met right before the pandemic and stayed together through it. But
yeah, the others are like, we need to split up or else I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, like, yeah, I saw so many of those. Like,
wow.
Yeah, there was, especially around like kind of wedding season. My like social media had like all these really awkward posts of like, we've decided we're not going to reschedule the wedding. We're actually just going to call it off. And you're just like, this is okay. Like, I mean, that's good, I guess, better than to just go ahead and do something. But yeah,
I'm gonna go live on a commune in Idaho. I don't
Yeah.
want to be around people anymore.
Yeah.
But so you wrote a book.
Mhm.
Tell me about the book, because I want you to explain it. It's a very interesting topic. It's an interesting thing to go after. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's called Apologies I Never Got, and it's dating and relationship horror stories phrased as the apologies you never got from the people who never gave them to you. And so the book is split up into categories. So each apology section has about like 10 to 15, and then they're split into things that match up with like contemporary dating phenomena. So like you have a gaslighting chapter, there's one on just dating in general, there's like a lying chapter, and yeah, so all the chapters kind of match up. So at the end, there's what I call a sip of wisdom, and it's just about like my input, what I've learned, what I've seen, and kind of like breaks down. Like for gaslighting, it talks about like how you can spot it and how you can stop it and that kind of thing. And then for like the dating, it talks about like ways to streamline your dating experience, how to find your deal breakers, that kind of thing.
So give me an example, like gaslighting. I find gaslighting really interesting because it's not just dating, it's something we deal with. It's taken on a whole, it's been around for a long time. It's just the terminology of that is a relatively new thing. So give me an example of that. How what's the apology that was never given for gaslighting? So how does that play?
Oh my gosh, you want to hear the worst one?
Oh, of course.
I like debated putting this in the book, but it's in there now. So it actually came from one of my mom's friends, which is ironic. And so she was married to her husband, and she just had this feeling that he was cheating with his secretary, as one does. They also all work together. So that's another little component that becomes interesting at the end. So she thought he was cheating with the secretary, and he gaslighted her about it so badly that he had her go to therapy. Like, just like, you're crazy. This is all on you. So he had her go to therapy. And one day she came home and he had completely moved out to move in with the secretary that he had, sworn up and down he wasn't dating. And then when she came into the office, he fired her and asked her to stay on for a week to train the secretary to do her job. Gaslit her to the extreme.
Do you know the thing about that isn't even that it's morally wrong, which it is. It's that's so much work.
It's so much work.
Like
Much work.
you know, it's just like how I can't imagine another woman being worth that much.
I know. Like, I don't get it. I mean, just say like, yeah, I'm with the secretary. You caught me, you figured it out. Like, how are we gonna divvy up assets? Like, I just don't understand the whole, like, you know.
Was she like half his age too?
The secretary?
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
And then did they remain together?
I don't actually know.
I'll have
to check in.
Yeah, because that's always the story. Is like, oh, I sacrificed my whole life and I'm in love with this 20-year-old and you know, I'm 50, but we're gonna make it work. And then 2 years later, he's like, oh, that didn't go well.
It's a fantasy, and that's what I tell, like, you know, a lot of, like, I've worked with men kind of going through a midlife crisis like that, and it's you know, it's a fantasy because that 20-year-old has her own problems. She's a real person. So right. You know, and she will age and she will have her own things going on. So like this fantasy of this perfect, demure, no issues 20-year-old isn't real. Like, you're going to get into that and then realize like, oh, she's a person and she could have bigger issues than the wife you just left. You know, you don't really know. Yes. Like, yeah. So I feel like that's kind of, it's just this, you know, image of this easy, fun, sexually passionate lifestyle, and it's like, it's just a fantasy, it's not real.
But isn't fantasy like, that's part of the problem, not just in that situation but in all of dating, is whether it's, you know, you flip through Bumble and then you okay, here's the example, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be on the same page for this.
Okay.
So if you're on a dating app, right, and you meet somebody, and not to date myself, but I met my ex-wife on a matchmaking online service back when they were websites, way back when. So I remember the old days where you would have the website, and then now it's just the apps are an extension of that, and they're so much faster. Yeah, and addictive because they don't play
they're
on
very addictive. Yeah,
it has nothing to do with your gambling or the part of your brain that gets the immediate swipe feedback and the dopamine and everything. But if you meet someone, there's that texting message game that goes back and forth. And what I always learned and I experienced was, if that game goes too long, you create a fake person in your mind based upon these messages or how you hear them talk, or you fill in the blanks. Yeah. Because the human brain has to do that. Right. So if it goes on too long, when you finally meet them, you are going to be meeting a completely different person live than you have created in your brain. Yeah. And that's a huge problem, because you're setting them up on a pedestal, you're setting this bar, and how are they going to live up to that unless they're the most amazing person in the entire history of the universe and they blow it all out of the water, which happens. But for the most part, you're hoping for the best.
Yeah. There was a guy that I worked with, I guess it was a little while ago, but he had that happen where he, like, and this girl were just texting from this dating app, and they did that for like, I mean, it was during the pandemic, but they did that for like, I don't know, a little more than a month. And they got kind of like to the point of like, oh, I can't wait to kiss you. I can't, like, when I see you, I'm going to like hug you. And then they went on their first date and he was like, just not attracted to her in person. Like, she was an attractive girl, but he was like, I didn't want to kiss her. I didn't want to like hug her, but like we'd set up this huge expectation. And then she was like really upset that he didn't want to do that. And she had set up all these expectations of him. And so, yeah, I like definitely could see that pattern playing out during the pandemic, especially. But like, yeah, we do that. We fill in the gaps, and, you know, we really want it to be this perfect experience, but we can kind of create this person that's not real.
Yeah. And then you can lay in a pheromone kind of thing with that too, because I'm a big believer in like pheromones and the physicality of somebody. Like it's you get up close to them and you smell them.
Yeah, no, totally. I am right there with you. No, it's true.
Your body chemistry has to match. And it's funny because over the years, I've heard stories from women where they're like, the guy smelled my hair. And they're all creeped out by it. And on one hand, I totally get it. I'm totally like, I understand it's creepy if the guy was like, is that Head and Shoulders? It's like, that's bad. But I also understand there's like the whole pheromone issue. And then if I'm not really big into perfumes, because I was raised in a household where we didn't have them around because my mother had issues with them, so we never did colognes or perfumes, so I never got into all that. I don't like to wear cologne. And there's certain perfumes that like ding, like like are incredible, but for the most part, if a woman is doused in perfume, it bothers me, or I want to know what their real body chemistry is. I want to know what to see if we match. And so I've heard them where they're like, he sniffed my neck when he was kissing me, or when we were hugging. And I'm like, part of me creepy, part of me totally get it.
Right.
I totally understand what they're trying to make that connection. So I could see how somebody could meet virtually, build this whole thing up, and then they meet in person. They're like,
nope,
it's just not there.
It's just not there. Yeah.
The problems that we go through just to find someone are just how difficult is it?
I know.
But I guess we could all go tarot cards, and you could like just pick all of our futures for us or something like that, right?
Quite how they work.
How'd you like that segue, huh?
That's good segue.
So you called me out on it earlier. Yes, I'm definitely a skeptic when it comes to that stuff. One of the reasons is anytime anyone ever does like a tarot card reading, or anyone does any of that, it's always, you're going to come into money. Never see it. Never see it. Never, this money never appears.
Well, maybe you just haven't gotten there yet.
Or maybe they're
one day it'll all come and you're like, damn, that tarot reading was right.
That's not causation. That's not tying together 30, oh my God, it's the money they told me I got when I was 11. It's but you use it, you were telling me that you kind of use it as an icebreaker, or as a personality thing.
Yeah, and I use generally with that stuff, I have like a relationship oracle deck, and so it's a little more tuned into that, as opposed to just like the traditional tarot, which has some of those cards, like you have the death card, you have the tower card, that can be like a little intimidating to people, whereas the relationship oracle is a little more warm and fuzzy.
It sounds like the Book of Questions to me, almost. You remember that book? It's like, how can we here's something about you. Oh, well, that question appeals to me because I find a way to connect to that. So but how would you use that? Like, do you just pop it out at parties and be like, who wants to get their tarot card? You're on the bus. And
I'm on
like,
the bus. Hey, you want to read it?
How do you bring that up? Or do people come to you and actually they come to you for readings?
Yeah, I do. Like,
that they're coming.
Yeah, like,
you're not psychic. You're not psychic.
I'm not psychic. They'll book it, or if I'm working with someone who's reached out and said, like, I just am having, like, I'm dating the same person or whatever, like, I'll just use it to kind of like see what's in the cards, see what's going on, and see if they relate to it. And like 9 times out of 10 they do. And if they don't, they're like, well, it's almost like that. It's blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like all of that is just tools. It's the same with astrology. Like, I usually will bust out their chart and see what's happening with that. And it just gives you kind of like an idea of what's going on that might be causing some of the patterns, like, because we all have patterns, right? We all are working through something. And relationships are definitely mirrors of that. I think that's what they are more than anything, is like just a mirror of what we need to work on and what we're calling in. And, as you start working on yourself and even like your energy, like, whatever you want to call it, when you feel better about yourself, you're bringing in a different kind of person.
Okay, but then it sounds like you use them more like Rorschach cards than tarot cards, because it's, if you pull up something and say, okay, well, this card says you're having an issue with blondes, which I know is really random, but just for fun. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're right. You're right. Every time I go out with the blonde, I'm attracted to brunettes. And it's like, so it doesn't seem like it's picking out things in there, or are you? Fight me on this. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me, fight the skeptic.
Fight the skeptic.
Five rounds. No.
I know. See, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not like a converter. I'm just like, oh, you don't like it? That's cool. Like, I use it. It works for me. Like, I'm very like laid back about it.
I could see it being fun. It's when people, I have no problem with it as entertainment. I have no problem with it if people even believe it. It's when they start making life decisions, or if they start affecting other people's lives, or when they get in my face and they're like, you don't know, which has happened. So that's my issue. When, if somebody's going to try, take somebody else in with them.
Right. Because
if
they
it
are
affects someone
accurate.
else's life.
Yeah. And they can be really scary accurate, but I think that's kind of how you tell if you have a good tarot reader, a good astrologer, a good psychic, a good medium, whatever it is. Like, they're all going to tell you, like, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. And so and the whole point of it is really to get you to access this information within yourself. Like, I'm not dating all these people, you are, so you tell me what's going on, like, I can be your mirror, I can help you dig, I can, like, tell you what patterns I'm seeing. But at the end of the day, like, we're all in charge of our own growth, our own relationships. So, like, I feel like deep down we always know kind of what's happening, and so it's just kind of like facilitating that. And I think that's what all of these tools are, is just kind of a connection to, like, a greater consciousness that can help us kind of dig down and see what's going on. So if you have, a psychic who's like, you have a demon attached to you and you have to come to me every day and pay me $300, like, obviously that's not accurate. If you're getting a tarot reading and they're pulling the death card and they're like, if you don't want to die, you have to pay me like $800. Obviously that's like not the jam. But if you're like going to someone who's like, hey, does this resonate with you? And you're like, yeah, it does. Or if you're like, no, not really, and they're like, all right, cool, let's do another one. Like, let's see what's going on, then that's kind of how, you probably hit on like a ethical reader who wants to try to help you.
Who comes to you more for the readings, men or women?
Like, men secretly more. Like,
really?
Yeah, like, I'll get reached out to like on secret DMs, or like just a friend will be like, like, whereas women I feel like would actually like openly comment or book me or whatever, whereas men I feel like are more like secretive. But I feel like a lot of my clients have been men, like, they really have, because they seem to like, struggle. If men are really struggling, then I think they kind of turn to other options, because maybe therapy and different things haven't been working, or they're embarrassed of that, and so they're like, okay, maybe this will work. Like,
do they have like so when they come to you, like, how does it work with you? Do they have questions, or you just do a reading, or does it a little of each?
It can be a little of each.
So what kind of questions do these guys have then?
Like, why can I not make something work? Because
you fear intimacy.
Because you have the emotional bandwidth of a child. So that's why you can't make it work.
Man, child, you wear t-shirts over.
You 40. Wear t-shirts and you're over 40. That's it. That's the answer to all man's relationship problems. Like, you're over 40 and wearing a t-shirt, that's why you're doomed.
So no, I'm serious when I ask this. So when and women too, but men mostly, when they ask you some of these questions, do you just look at them and be like, really? Like, maybe this is something you need to really, you're coming up with something that's pretty obvious there, my friend.
I try to meet them where they're at, right? So they're like, this girl isn't responding to me, I don't think she likes me, I can't figure it out. And I'm like, have you like talked to her? And they're like, no. You're like, she doesn't know that you like her. But like, you can just say that. You just have to be like, okay, well, let's see what might be going on,
Well, wait, yeah, so you bring up an interesting point. What do you do? So a guy goes out on a limb, right? And there's somebody he's interested in. Maybe it's we're back at the produce section at the grocery store. This whatever grocery store we keep going back to has an amazing produce section. I'm really starting to believe, because
it's Erewhon. It's Erewhon, 100%.
Yeah, it's just organic section that doesn't spoil.
Yeah.
So if somebody goes out on a limb, whether it's at the grocery store, or maybe somebody they work with, or someone at the gym, and at first things seem to be going, wow, okay, there is some electricity here, and then suddenly they get shut down. How should they take that? Do you give them advice, or do you ever have any thoughts on how to kind of come back from that? Because for some guys, it's just like, whatever, I talk to 100 women a day and whatever. But most guys are like, it stings. Yeah. It's like, is it me? Is it them? Did I not wear deodorant today? Is there something stuck in my teeth? am I just fugly?
Yeah,
You know,
men take it so personally. I mean, everyone throws shade at women, like we're all emotional. Men take it so personally. And I'll be like working with somebody and he'll say something like, you know, I just feel like, you know, this woman I dated 5 years ago said I was too short. And so I'm just too short to date women over this height. And you're like, what? Like, you're like, that's one person's opinion from like 10 years ago. You don't have to, you know, but they just hold it. They take it so personally and they hold it and then they use it going forward to kind of determine their dating route. And you know,
they project it.
They project it. Oh
yeah.
my gosh, because they hold it and they take it so personally. And there's just more, I feel like, angry about it. Like women like cry it out and men are just like secretly like holding it angrily. But and they project it all over the place. And so I feel like but men don't talk about it, right? Like they're not gonna go cry to their buddy like this way women maybe do, of like, you know, if a guy's mean to you, you just go to your group of girlfriends and cry it out. Whereas a guy's not gonna do that probably. Like they're not maybe even gonna tell anybody because they're ashamed or whatever.
We don't have a support system like that. We don't. And a lot of times I think that when we do hang out with our friends or whatever, we boil it down to like a simple, like, oh, she was a bitch.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and which isn't fair because it's not. That's us reacting and that's us just trying to put up the shield and be like, oh, it wasn't us. It wasn't.
Yeah.
You know,
I just think it comes down to, and like what I tell men generally is, or everybody really, you know, it really comes down to like, again, the mirror thing. Like, how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about what they're saying? Because, you know, the example I give in my book, like I'm 5'3", so I'm pretty average, maybe just short for a woman. So if a guy I was dating dumped me and was like, you're way too tall for me, like, I'm going to laugh at him and be like, okay, like, that's weird. You know, I'm not going to take that personally at all. I'm going to 100% see like, that's on him.
Yeah.
But if I felt bad about something about myself, like if I felt bad about my weight and somebody dumped me for being too fat or whatever, then I'm going to take that really personally because that's how I genuinely feel about myself. But that's what dating is. Like, are they hitting on something that you feel about yourself? Or because if they're not, then you're not going to take that personally. Like, you have to take everything in relationships with a grain of salt because they are so, you know, subjective. Like, what I like isn't the same thing as what my friends like, you know, and what's too tall for me is just right for someone else. So like, you have to get really clear of like how you feel about yourself.
That's one thing that's happened to me a couple of times is I've dated, so I'm 6'2", I'm like a tall 6'2", and I've dated a lot, let me take that back. I've dated some women who are shorter. So like I've dated a couple women who are like 5'2", 5'3", and at first they're like, oh, it's so amazing, you're so big, I feel like you're taking care of me. And then after a while, it actually, like, it doesn't work. It's actually, there's they get past that, and they were so tied up in the idea of having the big guy who's going to protect them. Once you start to get to know each other and it moves on, they're like, oh wow, I really got hung up on the physical part of it and didn't allow us to get closer and learn about each other. You know, that was my hang up. Just like a guy might be like, oh, well, I'm looking for this type of physicality in a woman. And they get so hung up on that and they're not able to roll by. It's been one thing I keep running into. It's hard to find. I think as I get older, it's more of just like, I just want to click with somebody. And you figure out what the areas are where you lock in, where you click in, and they're different than when you were younger. They really change. Going out and drinking and dancing all night doesn't really seem as important.
No, I know. You really age out of that. And I feel like, you know, as you get older, you really do figure out what's genuinely important because you've, you know, gotten with people who had those other qualities and watched it not work over and over. And you're like, oh yeah, that's not as important. And it doesn't get me where I want to go, which is like a long-term relationship. And so you get better about, like, I think just naturally, or hopefully, I mean, I guess that's not always true, but hopefully you get better about that. And, you know, a big one too is like, especially, you know, I think, again, not to make it a gender thing, but especially women are really big on like oh, but I love him. Like, he's treating me really badly, but I love him so much. And I feel like as you get older, you realize like you can make connections with lots of different people,
Mhm.
and you start to value how you feel in a relationship more than maybe how they feel about you, or like this big amorphous love concept. Like you kind of get a little bit better about seeing how important actions are and how important it is how you feel in the relationship, whether you feel valued, whether they're treating you well. Like, you get to a point where you can walk away from something toxic, even if you really deeply care for that person. Like, you just start to value different things, you
Yeah.
know?
What are some of the things that you run across that are not true? Like there's there's the one, oh, there's only one person out there for me. You run in,
Yeah.
I don't think you run into that as much as you used to, but it used to be like, oh, well, there's just one soulmate for me. This Hollywood version of, ironically, we live in LA, but this Hollywood version of the perfect love story, eyes across the room, and we knew from that first moment, love at first sight.
Mhm.
I think that's one. What else do you run into that you're just like, that's going to cause you harm if you believe that that's the way it's going to work?
Yeah, like the love conquers all. I can fix them. I can
I
save
can
them. I can
change.
change. They can change. If we just both morph into completely different people, then this is going to be great. Like, yeah, I feel like that's a big one. Like, you
The
know,
change one is big. The change one is big. I see him as a lump of clay that I am going to mold into my perfect
yeah.
man.
Or if he would just do this thing or not do that thing. And it's like, yeah, but he is doing that thing, or
Yeah.
he's not doing that thing. And like, that's okay. It just comes down to like what's going to work for you and what's not. And, people really deep dive into it of like, like, for example, if a guy is like drinking a lot, and like you maybe would even qualify him as an alcoholic, and they're like, well, if he would just quit drinking, he'd be great. It's like, okay, but he is drinking and this is what he's choosing to do. And they're like, but I just know he has to stop drinking. And it's like, that's not your choice. Like, you don't know
Yeah.
that. What if like drinking is like the only thing keeping some giant like cyst inside him from rupture? Like, you just don't know what's best for other people. That's a really weird example, but like, like you just don't know.
Alcoholism is a medical treatment.
Alcoholism
love
could
it.
be a medical treatment. You don't know. Like, but
Well, what about the men who, um, what about sticking to who they are? I mean, it's one thing if it's like, you learn, maybe you start. So we'll use the woman in the t-shirts as an example. I wear t-shirts. She made a comment about when you go to the gym, she's like, well, you should have like a certain, obviously this didn't work out, but one of her things
I
was,
can't imagine why.
so, well, here's a pure example, because it's just you and me, no one's listening.
Okay.
So when I go to years ago, I lost a lot of weight. I changed my entire life, and those who know me know I went from about 260 pounds to 180 pounds in about 3 months.
Wow.
I had a life-changing experience. Friend of mine died, and a few other things happened, and it just made me wake up one day. So I would go to the gym 6 days a week, twice a day, and I would sweat like crazy. So I came up with the habit of using gym shirts that were, inspirational, but at the same time, I knew I was going to go through 2 or 3 of these a day.
Right.
I'm not going to fill my closet with Under Armour shirts.
Mhm.
And, I'm not worried about being a fashion statement
Mhm.
at the gym. I'm worried about just wearing something that soaks up the fat. So when I go, the sweat. So when I go to the gym, my gym shirts are usually torn up, ratty, because I'm destroying them,
Right.
destroying these shirts. Because if a man sweat, after a while, you just can't get it out of the fabric.
Yeah.
So this person's like, I hate it when when men wear t-shirts to the gym. They should wear gym clothes. And I'm like, well, I wear them for a reason, But if she said, when we were dating, she made the comment about wearing t-shirts, and I made a mental decision. I made a decision when I went out with her, I wore a dress shirt or I wore something else. And then after a few dates, I kind of realized, we knew this wasn't
Yeah.
working, and there were other issues. So as a man, where's the line between, okay, well, you know what? She likes this. I can tweak that. It's not making up who I am versus a massive change where you're fundamentally changing who you are and what you do. Where do we play in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's case by case, you know, and that's the hard thing about dating. There's not hard and fast rules really for everybody about what they're comfortable with. I mean, I would say, judging from the stories that you just told, that sounds more like she's really insecure about something with herself and she's just projecting that onto you. Like people who are really nitpicky about their partner's like dress or car they drive or hairstyle or whatever it is, like generally that's some insecurity that they have. Like they need their partner to be at this certain level or represent them this certain way. Like, you know, that's on them generally. Like that's what that sounds like. So
but there's other things like I'm a carnivore, love meat. You're never going to change that. I'm never going to become a vegetarian. It's just not going to happen. I don't feel healthy when I eat when I have a non-carnivore diet. So I know my body. I've been on this earth long enough to pretty much know how certain things work with myself.
Yeah.
And there's a line.
Yeah. And that's, I think, where you would have to draw the line. Like,
yeah.
And it's different with everyone. Like I'm a vegetarian and I've dated many meat eaters and that's fine with me. I don't care.
But I'm not going to sit there in front of you and be like, look at this.
Right. Yeah. Like,
oh, you wish you could eat this.
Right. Like that's just annoying. Like I would just dump you for that. But like, you know, but like, but I do have friends who are like full vegan and full vegetarian and, you know, they prefer to have a partner that is that. I don't personally care. It's not one of my deal breakers. It's not one of my deal makers. If like, I think kind of that same thing that everyone has to determine what's good for themselves. So like, I've had boyfriends that I've lived with that eat meat and I've just added, like when I've cooked, I've just even added meat into theirs and mine stays vegetarian, but that's me. I know people who absolutely would not do that. So like,
is it okay to be upfront with those kinds of things?
Yeah,
I mean, how honest do you have to be?
I think you have to be really honest. I think
from sit down, hi, nice to meet you. By the way, I eat meat.
Yeah.
Like right from
if they're, I mean, if they're vegetarian, yeah. Like, I think you just have to be really. I mean, why waste time, you know? And
okay, but let me take it a step further then. So, and I keep using myself as an example because it's my show, but so I don't seem to do very well with attorneys. I don't seem to do very well with lawyers. There's just something about the way they view the world that I just don't do well with them in relationships or dating or even conversations. Is it okay for me to then say, you know, as I'm going through Bumble or as I'm meeting people, it's like, oh, you're an attorney, swipe left. Like I find myself, am I missing out because I'm not trying, or am I learning from my experiences and be like, you know what, 99.999% of the time, this doesn't work. So why should I try it again?
Yeah.
You know, if I burn my hand over and over, am I going to keep grabbing?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think something like that, because it's funny because I'm the opposite. Like I've dated so many attorneys. But I grew up with, like, my dad's an attorney, my brother's an attorney. So I think I relate pretty well with that. But that is more than just like an occupation. You're talking about like how they view the world. And you're talking about how they process things, because I can tell you it is really like I can spot an attorney a mile away, because it is absolutely a viewpoint, a perspective, how they process information. I mean, obviously not all of them, right? Like that's, you know, kind of a sweeping generalization, but like, I mean, 99.9, to be good at it, you're going to possess these qualities, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if you were just doing it based off of like, oh, you don't make enough money for me, occupation, that's one thing. But you're talking about, you know, how they, like, that would be the same as like, you know, maybe you didn't want to date a creative person, like a writer or a musician, because you're like, I like things a little more structured. I like the 9 to 5. That's different, right? Than being like, you don't make enough money, this or that. Like, I think,
yeah, that's different. It's a way of viewing the world, a way of interacting. It's almost like politics in some way. Like if you are a conservative or a liberal, if we have to put terms on it, you're going to view the world a certain way. And, you know, while you do change, you can change a little bit and you slide on the scale sometimes depending what happens, but you're still those are fundamental differences. If somebody sits down and analyzes a menu like they're reading a contract, then that's a little different than just like, oh yeah, I'll have the steak, oh well, I'm a vegetarian. It's a little bit different. So you think it's okay would you advise people then to try it, or just be like, you know what, I burned my hand on that one a few times, maybe not this go around, or man, she's really hot though?
I think it just depends, because you would know pretty quickly, like if they met that same criteria. Like if you go on a date to get coffee and you're like, oh yeah, no, she's just like an attorney, like you would know pretty fast. But I do think it's good to try to be open as much as possible. Like if you did meet them in the produce section and you felt like you had a connection, and maybe they weren't displaying the qualities that you don't like, then I think like, yeah, you would be green lighted to go have coffee with them at least and see. So like, I think it's good to stay open, but it's a fine line that we all have to walk of like, I don't want to waste my time, but I don't want to cut out people that could be a good match either.
Yeah.
But
are we back to coffee? Is that the go-to now? Because it seems like it's more people want to just have that quick date just to make sure there's a connection before they actually sit down and have a dinner. Nobody goes to the movies anymore. We're done with that's my childhood. It's like, you want to go to a movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think
remember during COVID when it was walks in the park?
It was always
like, let's go for a walk around the park 6 feet away from each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting, because that I was doing a podcast the other day, and it was a male host, and he got nailed by a girl that he had taken on a coffee date, and she had said like, let me give you a piece of advice, like class it up and take people to dinner or something. And he asked like, is that a thing that I'm just missing out on? And so it's interesting you brought that up too, but like, I think, I mean, I personally would not want to sit through an entire dinner if I can tell within 10 minutes that like, this is absolutely going nowhere. I mean, I feel like, I don't really drink, so I don't do like drink dates. I usually do like coffee or tea or whatever. So for me, that's more in line. But like, I mean, if you do drink, then you could do like a drink date where, you have a glass of wine and you're like, this is not happening. And then you're not committed, and you can walk away, and it's not this whole big, long, expensive, drawn out process, which actually.
Yeah. So you bring up something. So, I know we played the TikTok earlier, and I'm not going to look it up, but I heard it was funny. I got into TikTok, and I'm not the demo for that, but I actually got in because there was a hashtag dating over 40.
Mm-hmm.
And at first it was funny when you go into a TikTok or one of these apps, the algorithm is automatically set for 22-year-olds. It's just like the first thing, it's boobs, boobs, boobs.
Yeah.
House music, boobs, boobs. And then it starts to learn, oh, this person's actually not 22.
Right.
But I got in, and it was like, I found this hashtag, and it was all these horror stories of people just like, I'm never going to be with somebody. I'm going to die alone, dating in your 40s. There was the Hard Knock Life meme that was going around.
Oh,
yeah. Like, the ghosted, wants a threesome, still married. It was the same one over and over. But this one guy had a really interesting one where he kind of broke it down, and he's like, look, I'm not a millionaire. He's like, I do okay. But we're expected now because the way with the apps is you meet so many people.
Yeah.
You're expected to go out to dinner. If they want to go out to dinner, if you go out on 2 dates a week, he's like, it can cost hundreds of dollars just to go to dinner.
Yeah.
And he's like, so you expect me to drop literally, and he kind of went through his budget a little bit, and he's like, look, I'm not poor, but he's like, I'm not a millionaire, but he's like, if I went out on 2 dates a week for a month, he's like, you're talking thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And then they say something like, oh, well, coffee's not enough. So it brings up the question that's the new thing now is, do you split the bill? At what point do you say, does the man pay? At what point do both of you chip in? At what point is a woman like, I'm going to pay for this so I never have to see you again, and I don't feel like I owe you anything? How does that play out? What's your advice on that? What are you thinking?
I mean, yeah, a huge issue for women to feel like they owe somebody something. So, I mean, I think what I've seen work a lot is like, example, if you do the first date as like coffee or drinks and you just pay for your own, then you can walk out of that like free and clear, no muss, no fuss, you're not interested. Great. Like, and then I feel like, dinner or an outing or whatever is going to be your second date. But then I think it kind of gets into the territory of like, how do you feel about it? What makes you comfortable, what doesn't. By the second date, like, I'm fine if a guy wants to pay for dinner, if he wants to pay for like tickets to something, like, I'm fine with that. If he tries to come at me about paying him back for it, or like Venmo me, or like, you're coming back to my place because I paid for this, like, good fucking luck trying to come at me with something like that. But everyone's not like that. Like, some people really would feel guilty. Like, I would shut him down really hard. But luckily I haven't really had that like too often. But some people would feel really
the other
uncomfortable.
thing in LA we have a lot of are those first hiking dates.
Yeah, see, I'm not a big
that's in
fan of
LA.
that.
That's an LA thing. So people who don't live in LA, like, we always go, hey, do you want to go hiking? And anywhere else in the world, somebody would automatically think, oh, we're going hiking, like it's like you're going up Everest or something. Everyone has this image of that. In LA, it's not that. It's literally like a walk in the woods, or a walk on the beach. It's like an elevated walk. Is
the well-populated elevated walk.
Yeah, yeah. It's totally different, unless you really like push it, and then you have to want to do that. But that's another thing you see a lot, is like no hiking first dates.
Yeah.
It's like a little thing.
It's a whole thing.
Why I have my reasons why. Why do you think that people are pushed back on that so much? Or why has it become a thing? Why are hiking dates a thing?
So I think for LA, it is very different than anywhere else. Like, I lived in Austin before I lived here, and I had a guy suggest a hiking date. I was like much younger. And he wanted to go to this place that was like pretty secluded, pretty out in the middle of nowhere. It's a really cool hike. That's why he suggested it. He wasn't being a creep, but like, I just had to be honest with him. And I, like, the day before we were supposed to meet, I said like, hey, look, I'm really sorry, but like, I just don't feel comfortable like going on this with you. Like, I don't know you. This is a really secluded area. Like, would you be okay with us like grabbing a drink or whatever beforehand, like as a first date, and then we can see from there. And he was really cool about it. He was like, oh yeah, no, I totally get it. Absolutely. We met up, everything was cool. Our second date was the hike, everything was fine. He wasn't a serial killer. But like, I think for women especially, it can be intimidating. And then also it's kind of the same concept as like a dinner date. Like, if you are like 5 minutes into this and you're like, I am not having this guy at all, now you're stuck on this giant walk with them, like with nothing to say, no distractions. Like, I think there's like there's levels of reasons, right? There's like the safety thing, there's just the like uncomfortable thing. Like, I think there's reasons.
Speaking of creep factor, so I'm looking it up here. I can't remember the name of the app. Maybe you remember, maybe you will think of it before I find it. It's the one that bases it on your location. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Isn't that Tinder?
No. It's Tinder. It's
I know what you're talking about.
I'm trying to, there's so many dating apps now. It's the one where like it tells you who you've come across.
Yes.
And your locations. My God, there are so many dating apps.
I know. All I can think of in my head is Grindr, but that's not the one. But I know what
it's definitely
not that one. But I know what you're talking about.
There's no Grindr for straight people.
It's Tinder. Tinder is the Grindr.
It basically is. Tinder Happen. Is that it? Yeah, Happen. That's the one it tells you like, oh, well, you just
you just cross paths or whatever.
Yeah, and it sounds romantic because it's like, oh, well, they work in the building across the street, and but then it's like, oh, well, you just walked within like 30 feet of this person, and they think you're mighty fine. It can turn into like, this really scary thing.
For sure.
I've never, I tried it a couple times, and I never met anybody on that. Tinder, I just can't do anymore because it just. I tried it and I went on there, and there's so many bots, there's so many fake things. I got propositioned with many times, and that's my day. Like, I'm not trying to say I'm like this amazing man who's single and would love to meet somebody. Hint, hint. Anyone? But I'm not saying I'm like this angelic person or anything, but it's literally when you're swiping through, you're like, oh, they seem like nice. And then you get a, what are you doing right now? Come over.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just getting older, but there needs to be something more for me than this, like, this, well, I like photo 2 and 5. This 1 and 3 are
hit or
okay.
miss.
Yeah, in the dark of the night, maybe
yeah.
Am I alone in this? That I'm trying to find something more than just, the right here, right now? Or is it an age thing? Am I just alone in my ivory tower?
No, I think you're just on the wrong apps. I think you just need to switch over to some of the less hookup-y ones.
I have my Bumble app. It's just it comes and goes. It also has to do with, I've been very busy lately, so even if I connected with somebody, it would probably be like, look, I don't have time to, and that sounds like such an excuse, because you hear that from people. They're like, yeah, right, whatever, why are you on here?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, it's, I have the account, I delete. I'm like everybody else, like I'll have it
delete
for a couple days and I'll delete
yeah.
it, and then a couple months later I'm like, who's on there? Oh, same exact people.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently you're 1 mile away from me.
Yeah.
But it's another thing too, of like, well, how come you're not talking to me? And then we create this fake reality of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I have that too. It's like, oh, well, we hit it off and we talked a few times, and then you don't hear from them a couple days. Well, there's the etiquette, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, do I reach out to them? Do I not reach out to them? Am I imagining this? Was there no connection?
Yeah.
And that male mind starts to go.
Yeah.
But women are that way too. Tell me it's not just the men. Tell me the women.
No, women definitely do. Like, yeah, that's kind of when I do talk to people about the apps, I'm like, go in with like no expectation, no, like, if you haven't exchanged numbers, if you haven't, gotten to a certain level, even if you've had a couple like conversations back and forth, like, don't have an expectation on it. Just if they go, they go, like, because you just have no idea what's going on. I mean, think of like off the top of your head, you can think of 5 reasons. Like, maybe they were like back and forth with an ex and they got back together. Maybe they bumped into someone at Starbucks. Maybe they, I don't know, like check themselves into rehab. Like, there's so many like reasons that are just so off the charts, but like
they lost their phone.
They got lost hiking in the woods. Like, I don't know, like, you just have no idea if it might have absolutely literally nothing to do with you. So
they have a tumor and they're drinking heavily.
And they're drinking heavily to keep it from rupturing. Like, obviously. Like, so yeah, I just say, like, don't take that personally, because you have no idea. Maybe they had to move back in with their mom. Like, who knows? Like, just no expectation with it. If they go, they go. Like, even just make up an excuse in your head, like, like whatever helps you sleep at night about it. But like, just don't take it that
seriously.
Yeah,
that seems like part of the part. Dating's supposed to be fun, isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't the hunt and the pursuit and the meeting new people, being excited? It's supposed to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
We go back to back to our grocery store, to the produce section that we keep with the amazing heirloom tomatoes and right. I'm really building up this whole
organic
image in my head.
Spinach, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stay at the grocery store, but we go, it's that feeling of it's back to our clean pull. There's something about that moment, that whether it is real or whether it's a Hollywood romance that's in the back of our heads or whatever, but there's just that moment where you're like, what if this could be that little spark of interacting with somebody? It doesn't matter if we're 13 or 18 or 21, if you're at a party or our amazing grocery store, there's that little moment of electricity that gets you going, that dopamine, that pheromone, like all that connection, even if it's a second. And I always say something to people that, like, if I look at, so like, if I happen to come, here's one I do sometimes, is if I happen to look at somebody's driver's license and it's a nice photo for whatever, if you happen to catch a glimpse of it, it's like, oh, well, that's a nice photo. you have a nice smile in your picture or whatever. And they're like, oh, well, that's really nice of you. And I always say, well, if you see something and you think something, you need to say it, because you might never have a chance to say that again.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment of even just enjoying that back and forth, even if you never see this person again, or even if it isn't a love match, it's still that wonderful little moment that you get to have.
Yeah.
And, maybe you exchange that. So what's your, give me your top 5 or top 4, or just grab me a bunch of advice that people need to know. Like, how do we get through all this? We're getting back to, maybe we'll see people without masks. Maybe there'll be clean polls. Maybe we'll go back on Bumble.
We'll do that again. Yeah.
Maybe what do we need heading forward in our dating lives to make it easier, to make it more fulfilling?
Yeah, I mean, I think
besides tarot cards.
Besides the tarot cards. Yeah, I mean, just keeping in mind, like, it is supposed to be fun. We get really serious, we get really intense, but like, just keeping in mind it is supposed to be fun. And the more, again, streamlined you make it, the more fun it'll be, because if you're saying yes to every single person that asks you out, or yes to every single second date, like, you're gonna end up in a lot of really uncomfortable scenarios. But if you're really sure of, and that's the thing too, is like, people really have we talk about communication and relationships, but like, you need to know what you're saying, or you're not saying anything. So when you're saying like, oh, I want this, this, and this, like, have you actually thought about that? Like, have you thought about that's what you want and why? So I feel like the first step to even going out into the dating world is getting really clear of like, this is what I want, and this is what I'm comfortable with, and here are the things that I need out of this, and here are the things that just aren't going to work for me. And being really clear about not wasting anyone's time, like, and being really upfront about that. Like, I've had to do that. I was on a date like maybe a month and a half ago, and the guy was just like, oh yeah, I drink and smoke weed every day. And I'm like, I'm sorry, like, that's just not my lifestyle. Like, good luck with everything. Like, that's not where we're at. And like, he tried to be a little bit like combative of it, of like, that's really judgmental. I'm like, but it's not. Like, it's not my lifestyle. You're not going to enjoy spending time with me. I'm not going to sit here and watch you drink and get high every day. Like, we're just on different, like, it's not judgment, it's compatibility issue.
You could have something on the opposite spectrum of that. If somebody was a marathon runner and they're like, oh, well, I spend 4 hours running every day. You could be healthy, but that's like, you're never going to click with that.
Exactly. And that's all it comes down to. Like, even aside from like judgmental or not, like, it's just, this is not going to work for me. Thank you very much. Like, and streamlining it. And if I had caught a whiff of that before I'd gone on a date with him, I would have said, no, I'm sorry.
How much do you think that backgrounds play into something too? Because, for using myself as an example again, sometimes when I date somebody who, I was born and raised in the United States, culturally, if I date someone who was born in another country, oftentimes that actually creates problems, because it's like, I never can fully understand everything in their background, their culture, where they came from. Maybe they came from a country that had problems. Eastern Europe is an example. Like they came up in a country that had war, or they had a country that had certain issues, and it's like, I can never fully understand where they're coming from. And maybe that says I'm closed-minded, but at the same time, it's like, you want to hit on every cylinder, and it's like, there's a whole part of your life that is just unfathomable for me. How do you address things like that? Like, is it a matter of open-minded, or is it a matter of just saying, look, I'm looking for somebody who is more in the same, checks the same boxes that I do, so we can connect on that?
Yeah. And I think there's, the concept of like feeling it out a little bit. If you're, a couple dates in and it's already becoming a really huge issue, and they're having all these, effects from maybe the way they grew up, or they're, it's the same as anything. Like, you can have people with very different backgrounds that have lived here in the US, and it's like, how much does it affect your current life, and in what ways? And, I think you can certainly relate to how somebody feels, even if you haven't been in that same scenario. You can certainly understand like fear, shame, regret, like whatever it is. But I think the important thing is, how does it play out in their lives, and how does it affect you? Because you can certainly understand where someone's coming from if they're really traumatized. But if the trauma is causing them to get super drunk and scream at you, then you can understand what's going on with them and not be in that relationship and just say, like, you know, I'm sorry, like, this is something you're going to have to work through.
Or how they view the world, or how
right. And that's where people get
their
stuck, because it's not their fault. Absolutely. It's not their fault. They're from some war-torn place. But like, you know, where do you draw the line of like when you get to treat people badly? You know, like, are you the person who gets to, but like there's somebody from this country who was an orphan and in war-torn, so they get to be the one who treats people badly? Like, nobody gets to treat each other badly no matter what you've been through. Like, you just don't have that right. And so, you know, it's not so much a judgment or like a, you know, pushing them to the side. I think it just depends on, are you able to be okay with what's happening with them now? If they're in therapy and working on things and, you know, it's not showing up much in their lives or in how they treat you, then, you know, that's one thing. But I think that's kind of where background plays in. Like, how does it affect you now? How does it affect your relationship going forward?
Well, it sounds like we talked about that. It's like there's the romantic Hollywood version of like love at first sight and love conquers all. And then you have to take the logical part of your mind and kind of look at it and be like, look, you know, it doesn't always. Like, we need to take a step back. You know, not everyone's Romeo and Juliet. Well, some people are, and it ends badly.
Right.
You know, we always forget that it ends
badly. Yeah. And it could just be, you know, how somebody's background affects the way they view the world or their finances or what they think about this type of person or whatever. Like, again, it just like is just, how does this showing up and how does that, you know, so you can be open to somebody's background without necessarily like wanting it in your life, you know.
Do you tell people to look for red flags at all? Are there any certain red flags that you kind of advise them to keep an eye out for?
I mean, yeah, I do have, you know, some red flags that I think are pretty like across the board, but I think a lot of it too is pretty tailored of like, what is your red flag? What's going to work for you and not in your life? But what
are the across the board? Like yelling at waiters, having up shoes,
spending the whole time talking about their ex.
Okay. Now there's a difference between being hung up on your ex, and it needs to come up in the conversation because they need to know where you came from. Because there's, you know, you could have a little bit, we all have baggage. We all have a little, you know, a little briefcase or a little side bag or something. And then some people have a full on like set of traveling luggage, and like, you know, with matching handles and, you know, emblems and everything. But there's a point when you have to have that conversation where you're going to have to sit down and be like, all right, well, here's my past. You know, you don't have to get all detailed about it, but it needs to come out because it's part of who you are. So how do you address that without diving too deeply into it? Or
I mean, and it's also levels. It's levels of intimacy, right? So like, you know, on your first date, you should not be telling someone like, my ex was so bad in bed, and like all these things. Like, they don't need to know that.
Or she was that great.
She was that great. Like, I mean, I think mentioning like, oh, I'm divorced. Oh, my last long-term relationship was this. Like, that's fine. That's like, you know, and like, if you're getting into a long-term serious relationship with someone, then it might be good to share details of like, oh yeah, I've been cheated on, or oh yeah, this happened. But like, you just have to be really careful not to like trauma bond with it, or to like, what you see a lot is like people will start bashing their ex, like, oh yeah, she did X, Y, and Z. And the new partner is like, well, I would never do X, Y, and Z. And then they're kind of like creating this bond over bashing the ex, but that's not a real bond. And, you know, it takes two to tango. So like, yeah, there are genuinely just off the charts exes, but you know, generally there's some like engagement that's created a situation. And so, you know, for someone to blame every relationship problem they've ever had on their ex is like not realistic. And to ask a new partner to never exhibit any habits of your ex, like that's unrealistic too. Like there could be, you know, if your ex was so jealous, but that's because you went to strip clubs all the time. If you're going to strip clubs in your new relationship and you're asking this person, oh, don't be jealous like my ex, like these are really unrealistic expectations, you know?
But so let's fast forward in a relationship, let's, you know, 6 months, a year or whatever, to the point where you've got a good feeling for each other, you're understanding, you're growing as a couple,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to speak openly about certain things. So if you're with if you're with somebody and they do something and I hate to use the word trigger, but I'm going to use the word trigger. It triggers something because it was similar to something that your ex did. Even at this point, I mean, it can be a lifetime that certain things happen depending on how rough it was when you got out of it.
Right.
So then it's about how you communicate that to the other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, you don't go, oh my God, you're just like my ex.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's probably going to cause problems.
That's going to cause a lot of problems. Yeah.
So if we communicate better.
Yeah. And I think knowing how to communicate it, because ultimately, like, you're the one being triggered, right? Like, it may not be necessarily something the other person's doing wrong. So like, you have to come at it from this neutral perspective of like, I'm being triggered right now, so let's talk about what's causing this and like how I can, if you're being triggered, something's not healed, right? So you've got to work on that too. And then it's kind of both people meeting in the middle of like, how are you working on the unhealed portion that's caused the trigger, and how can your partner support you in that by maybe not doing that exact thing over and over, but pushing it all on to your partner to be like, don't ever do that thing again. Especially if it's not inherently good or bad, then that's a lot of expectation on someone else to fix something that's going on inside you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that meet in the middle compromise of like, okay, I'm going to, go to therapy or work on this, and you're going to support me in that by maybe communicating differently or doing this thing differently. And then you can kind of work through that issue. But I think a lot of people really think we need to bring exes into our new relationships. Like, there's a lot of emphasis on like, well, I just want to be honest, so I'm going to tell you all the things my ex ever did. It's like, there's not a lot of space for that. There's really not. Like, three's the crowd, and the ghosts of your ex, that's three. So I think like you can kind of start to determine to like where that line is of like, this is what you need to know versus this is what my therapist needs to know, like, and not.
But there's a danger there. Isn't there a danger there with if your ex did something, and even if it doesn't bother you, the person you're dating is aware of what it was. Mm-hmm. And then they act differently because they don't want to trigger you, even whether or not it's a triggerable thing. So am I being clear?
No.
Is that kind of it?
Okay, give an example. Yeah.
Okay, so my ex, and I've been open about this, is I'm very into conspiracy theories.
Okay.
For example. So I'm growing to be able to not be bothered by that. I've gotten very far, but I know I still have a way to go. But if I'm dating somebody and they know that about my ex, they may avoid certain topics and certain conversations that honestly really don't bother me, but they think that they might bother me, or they don't want to take that chance.
Yeah.
So now there's a wedge being driven because they're afraid to talk about certain subjects instead of just being who they are.
Right. And that's where the oversharing about an ex can like come into play, because then people think they have to dance around what that ex has done.
Well, if I sit down on the first date and be like, okay, we're going to here's a PowerPoint presentation on what, my past relationships. But if you have, it doesn't matter if my ex was a conspiracy theory or your ex was a professional football player or something, that's an interest. It's not the old story of like you were talking about your dad, about the secretary. That's a traumatic thing.
That was not my dad.
Oh, sorry. About the guy. Sorry, I thought it was
my dad's stuff is actually not far off of that, but that one was not my dad.
So while it's still somebody who, if somebody that's a whole other story of widows. But if somebody's ex had an affair with the secretary, we've heard that story. Like, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And while it's tragic and it's horrible and they have their own reaction to it, if somebody said that to me, I wouldn't go, oh my God, that is the most unique story I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when people hear about my ex-wife and some of the things she was into, they want to know more because it's such a unique story. So I have the issue of, I'm going to tell you about it, but this could turn into literally an HBO movie.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing, the rabbit hole that it can go down. So it's up to me to kind of just spoon feed them, be like, well, this is all you're going to get for now, but man, do I have stories to tell you down the road if you're still with me. Or if somebody had like, oh, your ex was an NFL football player or something, it's like, that's an interest. What happened? Why did that not go? So if there is an interesting story there, how do we balance between the interesting story, their interest in it, how it shaped you, how you recovered from it, versus just somebody like, oh, my ex a bitch.
Yeah.
That blankety blank this, blah, 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 blah. And then it becomes bashing.
Right.
Versus, wow, and it could be something as horrible as like you came out of an abusive relationship, but you recovered from it. You are healthy now. But I want to know the story of how you were able to overcome that. So there's different levels in there. It's not quite as simple.
It's not as cut and dry. And like, and a lot of that is communication and, trying to kind of figure out, I think too, it's a good tool, I guess, to kind of talk more about like how it affected you, as opposed to like, well, they did X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, they did whatever, and this is how it affected me, and this is what I take from it, and kind of like bring it back to you, and just being really cognizant of like, oversharing about exes can mess with the new relationship. It really can. And sometimes that's like a give and take, right? Like you share something and then you see it affected the relationship, and you just kind of take note of that, of like, well, that was an overshare, and like maybe communicate with, the new partner of like, I shouldn't have told you that. I'm really sorry. Like, how can we get past it? Because it can really get in people's heads, and like once you've said it, it's really hard to take it back or unsay it or get it out of their mind. So I think just being really, cognizant of that like your, past can come into the new relationship in a way that maybe you don't want it to.
Yeah.
And, and that's also by like 6 to 8 months of a relationship, I feel like you kind of got a sense of like what the other person could probably handle, or what's like, how does it affect the new relationship going forward, is really kind of your navigation tool. Like, is this going to hurt the relationship, or is this going to help it? Like, is them knowing this information going to help them understand where I'm coming from, or is it just information that's going to like tank us,
Yeah. How long, and I know every relationship's different, but is there like a shelf life, or is there like, how long do you think it takes somebody to decide whether or not how long does it take for you to get to know somebody enough to kind of judge this has got a good place to go? Because some people, it's like, oh, I knew on the first date, boom. And then some people are after 3 months, 6 months, they're like, I still don't know. We see each other once every couple of weeks. I haven't figured out if it's real or not. There's got to be more of a sweet spot in there.
Yeah.
Do you think, I know it's different for everybody, but what would you tell people when they're trying to find that?
I think as you go along, you figure out where your sweet spot is a lot more. Like mine's pretty off the bat. Mine's like within the first month. If by the time the check comes, by the time I'm like in or out, man.
No, he's wearing a t-shirt. I'm done with him.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of knows, they get to know a little bit better. And, I think after like, I would say 6 months, if you're still like not thinking you want to be in a committed relationship with them, if you still want to see other people, like cut your losses. Like you're not that into them,
How long should people see other people before they become, what do you advise on that? Before they become exclusive?
Yeah, I think, so for me personally, I feel like mine might be a little different than maybe what I've seen. Like I go into like off of dating apps or first dates, like I assume the other person is seeing other people because I'm seeing other people. And I think that's how it kind of should be until you get to a point where you both are kind of like, oh, okay, like this is, moving past that point. And, if we are seeing other people, let's just let that go. But I think too, there's a natural progression for me. Like if I start being really into someone and seeing that this connection's going somewhere, I'll just kind of naturally drop off anyone else.
Should you tell them? Should you sit down and have just wanted to let you know I'm not seeing anyone else?
I generally don't, but I've had that blow up in my face of, someone thinking I was being exclusive and we weren't. And then they, get upset about that. I'm like, dude, we've been on 2 dates. Why would I be exclusive? Like that's insane. But But some people really look at dating apps that way. Like they look at like, if I've gotten to this point where I've given you my number and we're on a date, like now I just am interested in you.
Mhm.
So I think at that point, just kind of feeling out what you're comfortable with and what feels good for you. And, then getting to a point where, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm like not a huge fan of like oversharing, that kind of stuff. I think like it can just naturally develop. And then maybe you get to a point where you do say like, hey, let's just, if you're saying like, I want to be in a relationship with you, I think to me, that's great. Everyone's going to stop seeing other people without saying, oh, well, I'm seeing Johnny and Bobby. Should I cut that off? Like you can just say, I think
you have to make a list.
You have
If
to
you have to make a list, then
like,
you're dating too many people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like to me, I just kind of assume everyone's seeing other people until we get to the point of being intimate, maybe sexually. Then I might start asking more questions and be comfortable with them asking me. But before I have sex with someone, I'm going to be in a relationship with them. So by that point, I'm assuming if you're saying, let's be in a relationship, that's exclusive. That means we're not seeing anyone else, but I don't need a list from him of like who he's been dating. I don't need screenshots that he's cut it off with them. Like, I think oversharing and getting really into each other's space with that can be really disruptive. But I think I'm in the minority with that because I think so. I've seen a lot of people but I've also seen it blow up in their face where they go in and overshare it. But yeah, I think just like it should kind of just develop naturally. And if it's off of an app, I assume everyone's dating everyone else. Like,
I think that's an age thing though. Do you find that age plays into that a little bit? The older someone is, the more exclusive they get quicker.
They think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think our generation or my generation is definitely more like the app is more casual, whereas, but everyone I think has different expectations going into it because I have friends who are like, well, we send each other 3 messages on the app. That's like, I should stop talking to other people. I'm like, I don't see it that way. But like, again, I think it comes down to like what you're comfortable with and trying to see where the other person's at. And you can kind of pick up details and stuff like along the way, I think. But I don't know, for me, I think it's more of a natural progression of like, we're all seeing other people. If we're going into a couple of dates and then we're feeling more of a connection, I'm going to naturally drop off the people I'm not feeling as much of a connection with. And then by the time I'm at the point where I'm ready to say like, yes, I'll be your girlfriend, then I'm not seeing anyone else by then, and that's without me saying like, well, I was seeing this person and now I'm only seeing this person. Like, I don't know. I guess to me, it's like, if we're not sleeping together, if we're not committed to each other, then it's not really your business. Like,
yeah. But what if the person, like one person is more into it than the other person?
Yeah, that's kind of what, like, where it has backfired on me is like, they thought we were like exclusive and I was not,
Yeah.
But I mean,
what if you want to get to that though? What if you're with somebody, you've gone on a couple dates, maybe not even a couple dates, well, a couple dates, and you're like, okay, I like this person. I don't want to muddy the water for myself because I really am into this person. You're not being silly and you're not thinking that they're at the same point, but you at least are putting yourself into a mindset where you're like, if this works out, I'm willing to put everything I have into this, and I don't want to have other voices in my ear going, hey, why don't you come over?
Yeah.
or whatever.
Well, and I think too, I maybe should be clear when I say like dating, I don't mean like, I'm talking like hanging out, going to a show or getting coffee or whatever. I'm not saying like, when I say seeing other people, I don't mean like
Netflix
seeing every like, at that point, like, yeah, you should, especially like, because that can affect other people's health or whatever. Like, yeah, you should disclose at that point. But if you're like, if I go on coffee and have a coffee date with one guy on Tuesday, I'm not going to let him know I'm going with someone else on Friday. That's to me is just like, you're asking for trouble at that point.
Do they still do the night thing? Like it used to be a thing where, you're my Friday, my, like if somebody's higher up on your possibility list, they get the Friday night. And then if you're a Tuesday, realize that you're probably not really high up on their list of potentials.
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
I mean, I think that's like everyone's different, I mean, because I'm a writer, so my weekend is during the week. So if you get a spot on my weekend, which is during the week, then
it means nothing.
It means
just
nothing.
so the theme that I really am pulling away from all this is it sounds like we need to be more mindful.
Mhm.
We need to be more in the moment, and we also need to take stock and responsibility for what we do and say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
That kind of feels like where we're heading with things.
Mhm.
So where does everybody find you? How, if somebody wants to get their tarot card read or they want to your upcoming book once it comes out, what's your platforms? What do we got for you?
Yeah, usually I just kind of direct people to the website, and it's BethanyNicole.com. And then my Instagram is at Bethany Nicole Author. So easy enough. And that's where all the updates and things tend to end up.
Make sure those are in the show notes. Any last words of advice for people as they head out into the dating world? I'll take anything I can get. I'm the wacky creative. I have to deal with that already.
I mean, just stay in your center, like stay true to what you need and what you want, and don't accept less. And, but at the same time, just do what feels good to you. Like, your dating life better than anybody else. So if something doesn't sit right in your gut, that's a no. If something excites you, that's a yes. And, just kind of being open to new possibilities. But yeah, I mean, I think really at the end of the day, just staying in your center is the best thing you can do when you're dating.
I'm still hoping for that clean pull in the produce department at the grocery store.
Absolutely.
I really, really am. Really am. Because I have nice eyes. I'm hoping the mask will they'll be like, hey.
Don't they have clear masks? Can't you find one of those?
Yeah, then you look like a serial killer.
You look like a serial killer, but I don't know.
I don't know. I'm hoping for that clean pull. That'll be it.
I'm hoping for that for you.
Bethany Nicole, thank you so much for all of your advice. I feel like I owe you for a therapy session, or I'll Venmo you my half.
Venmo me, yeah.
So everybody check out her stuff. It's in the show notes. One of these days we'll solve all of dating's problems.
Yes.
Do you enjoy watching movies?
Yes!
Do you like to hear other people's opinions on movies?
Yes!
And do you find that you don't always have the time to listen to an entire podcast about one movie?
Yes!
Well, then you might enjoy my new podcast, Living for the Cinema. My reviews cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of what makes each film unique, but in less than 15 minutes. Check out Living for the Cinema on all platforms where podcasts are available.
Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. Help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review. If you want to support us even more, you can find a link to our Patreon account in the show notes. And if you're one of our diehard fans, head on over to thevikingdogstore.com, where you can find official Open Highway merchandise to show your support to the entire world. But most of all, thanks for listening.
For the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.
All rights reserved. Viking Dog 2021.